Imagine walking into your local grocery store this week. You head toward the shelves expecting to find the same products you've been buying all summer. But something looks different. A familiar brand is missing. A popular item is suddenly unavailable. And a product you've purchased for years is nowhere to be found. You ask an employee when it will be back. And the answer isn't what you expected. This is exactly why smart shoppers pay attention to product recalls, supplier issues, seasonal changes, and grocery availability. Because when a product is pulled from shelves, it doesn't always mean the entire category disappears. Sometimes it's one specific brand. Sometimes it's one batch. Sometimes it's a temporary supply issue. And sometimes the product may not return until much later. Today, we're looking at 13 grocery items that shoppers should keep an eye on before summer comes to an end. These products may be affected by recalls, seasonal supply changes, manufacturer decisions, shortages, or shifting grocery inventories. Some could become harder to find. Others may temporarily disappear from shelves. And a few may be replaced by different products as stores adjust their inventory. The important thing is this. Don't panic. Don't rush out and buy everything you see. Instead, understand which everyday groceries could potentially become harder to find and plan your shopping accordingly. If your family relies on a particular product, having a reasonable backup option can save you from scrambling later. And if you find a product your household uses regularly at a good price, buying a little extra may make sense, as long as you can store and use it before it expires. Before we begin, subscribe to Prepper Pulse and turn on notifications. We upload new videos daily with practical grocery tips, food storage ideas, and preparedness strategies to help you stay informed and ready. Now let's count down the 13 groceries you should keep an eye on before summer ends. Starting with number 13. Number 13. Fresh berries. Starting our countdown at number 13 is a summer favorite that many families buy every week. Fresh berries. Strawberries, blueberries, raspberries, and blackberries. These fruits are incredibly popular during the warmer months, but they're also highly dependent on weather, growing conditions, and transportation. Extreme heat can affect crop quality. Heavy rainfall can damage fields. And unexpected weather events can reduce harvests in major growing regions. When supply becomes tighter, shoppers may notice smaller packages, higher prices, or fewer varieties available at their local grocery store. Fresh berries also have a very short shelf life. Unlike canned or frozen foods, they must move quickly from farms to distribution centers and then onto store shelves. Any disruption in that process can lead to reduced availability. That's why smart families don't rely exclusively on fresh berries. If your household uses them regularly for breakfast, smoothies, desserts, or snacks, consider keeping alternatives available. Frozen berries can be a practical backup. They last much longer and can still be used in smoothies, oatmeal, baking, and other recipes. Canned fruit is another option for families looking for longer-lasting alternatives. The key is flexibility. You don't necessarily need to buy large quantities of fresh berries before summer ends. Instead, pay attention to prices and availability. If your favorite variety becomes unusually expensive or difficult to find, you already have another option ready. Seasonal transitions can also affect what appears on grocery shelves. As summer growing conditions change, stores may gradually adjust the varieties and quantities they carry. That doesn't mean berries will disappear completely, but certain varieties may become less consistent or more expensive. Fresh berries earn the number 13 spot because they're popular, perishable, and highly dependent on seasonal growing conditions. And the next grocery item on our list is something even more important for everyday meals. A basic protein that millions of families rely on every week. Number 12. Chicken breast. At number 12 is one of the most popular proteins in American grocery stores. Chicken breast. For many families, chicken is a weekly shopping essential. It's used in sandwiches, salads, soups, pasta, tacos, stir-fries, and countless quick dinners. But chicken prices and availability can be affected by several factors at once. Feed costs, transportation, processing capacity, labor, and disease outbreaks affecting poultry populations. When production is disrupted, grocery stores can experience temporary shortages or price increases. Chicken is also a highly perishable product. It requires refrigeration throughout the supply chain, from processing facilities to distribution centers and eventually to your refrigerator. Any disruption in the cold chain can create additional challenges for suppliers and retailers. That's why smart shoppers pay attention when they notice unusual price changes or empty sections in the meat department. If chicken breast becomes more expensive, families can consider other cuts that may offer better value. Chicken thighs, drumsticks, or whole chickens can sometimes provide more servings for the same budget. Another smart strategy is to buy only what you can safely store and use. If you find a good price and have adequate freezer space, freezing portions for later meals can help reduce the impact of future price increases. But there's no need to panic buy. The goal is simply to maintain flexibility. If your family depends heavily on chicken for protein, having a few alternatives in your pantry can make grocery shopping much easier. Canned fish, beans, lentils, or other shelf-stable proteins can help fill the gap when fresh meat prices rise. Chicken breast earns the number 12 spot because it is incredibly popular, highly perishable, and connected to a supply chain that can be affected by multiple factors. And the next grocery item is something many families use every morning. A breakfast staple that can become surprisingly difficult to find when demand suddenly increases. Number 11. Eggs. At number 11 is one of the most important everyday grocery staples. Eggs. Millions of families depend on eggs for breakfast, baking, sandwiches, and quick dinners. They're affordable compared to many other protein sources and can be prepared in countless ways. But egg availability can change quickly. Poultry disease outbreaks can reduce flock sizes. Feed costs can increase production expenses. And transportation or supply disruptions can affect what eventually reaches grocery store shelves. When supply tightens, shoppers may notice higher prices or temporary limits on certain products. Eggs are also highly perishable, which means grocery stores need a consistent supply chain to keep shelves stocked. That's why smart families don't wait until their carton is completely empty before thinking about their next purchase. If you regularly use eggs, simply adding them to your normal weekly grocery routine can help you avoid last-minute shopping. You can also consider alternatives for certain recipes. Powdered egg products may work for baking and cooking. Flax or chia mixtures can replace eggs in some recipes. And shelf-stable baking ingredients can help reduce your dependence on fresh eggs. The goal isn't to stockpile huge quantities. It's to have options. If prices suddenly rise or your preferred brand isn't available, you won't be forced to buy the most expensive option on the shelf. Eggs earn the number 11 spot because they're essential, widely consumed, and vulnerable to disruptions affecting poultry production. And the next item is another grocery staple that can disappear quickly when shoppers become concerned about supply. It's inexpensive, versatile, and found in kitchens across the country. Number 10. Butter. At number 10 is a dairy staple that millions of families use every single week. Butter. It's spread on toast, used for baking, added to vegetables, melted over popcorn, and used in countless recipes. But butter prices can be influenced by several parts of the dairy supply chain. Milk production, feed costs, energy, transportation, and seasonal demand. When the cost of producing milk increases, those pressures can eventually reach the price of butter. Butter is also heavily used by bakeries, restaurants, and food manufacturers. That means household shoppers aren't the only ones competing for supply. During periods of higher demand, retail availability can change quickly. Smart families don't need to panic by butter. Instead, they can watch for sales and consider buying an extra package when the price is favorable, provided they have enough freezer space. Butter freezes well when properly wrapped, making it one of the easier dairy products to store for later use. Another option is to keep alternative cooking fats available. Depending on the recipe, olive oil, vegetable oil, or other cooking fats can sometimes replace butter. Having alternatives gives your family more flexibility when prices change. The key is to avoid depending on a single product. Butter earns the number 10 spot because it's a daily use ingredient connected to the larger dairy industry, and changes in milk production or demand can influence both pricing and availability. The next grocery item is something that appears in almost every kitchen, and when its supply becomes tight, the effects can reach far beyond one simple product. Number 9. Cheese. At number 9 is another dairy staple that can become surprisingly expensive when supply pressures increase. Cheese. From shredded mozzarella to cheddar blocks and sliced American cheese, millions of households rely on cheese every week. It's used in sandwiches, pizza, pasta, burgers, tacos, casseroles, and countless quick meals. But cheese production depends heavily on the dairy industry. Milk supply, feed costs, energy, labor, and refrigeration all play a role in getting cheese from farms to grocery shelves. If milk production becomes more expensive, those costs can eventually affect cheese prices. Cheese also requires controlled temperatures throughout much of its supply chain. From processing facilities to warehouses and grocery stores, refrigeration is essential for maintaining quality. That makes transportation and energy costs especially important. Smart shoppers can protect their grocery budget by watching for sales and comparing different forms of cheese. Blocks are often more economical than pre-shredded packages. And depending on the type, some cheeses can be frozen for later use. If your household goes through cheese quickly, buying a reasonable amount during a good sale can help reduce the impact of future price increases. But don't buy more than you can safely store and use. Cheese earns the number 9 spot because it's a high-demand dairy product that depends on milk production, refrigeration, and a complex supply chain. And the next grocery item is one that many families don't think about until they suddenly can't find their preferred brand on the shelf. A simple breakfast staple that can become much more expensive when ingredient and transportation costs rise. Number 8. Breakfast cereal. At number 8 is a grocery item that millions of families reach for every morning. Breakfast cereal. It's quick, convenient, and easy to prepare. Just pour it into a bowl, add milk, and breakfast is ready. But cereal prices can be affected by more factors than most shoppers realize. Many popular cereals rely on grains such as corn, wheat, or oats. Those crops are influenced by weather conditions, harvest sizes, fuel costs, and transportation expenses. Packaging is another important factor. Cereal boxes require paperboard, printing, and manufacturing. If packaging materials become more expensive, the final retail price can increase. Then there's transportation. A box of cereal may travel through several stages before reaching your grocery store. Any increase in fuel or shipping costs can add pressure to the final price. Smart families don't necessarily need to stockpile cereal. Instead, they can keep flexible breakfast options available. Oats, pancake mix, bread, or other simple staples can provide alternatives when cereal prices rise. If you find a favorite cereal on sale, buying an extra box or two can make sense if your family will consume it before quality declines. But the biggest lesson is to avoid relying on one specific brand. Store brands and generic alternatives can often provide similar products at a lower cost. Cereal earns the number 8 spot because it depends on multiple agricultural and manufacturing inputs, and small increases across those areas can eventually affect what shoppers pay. The next grocery item is something you may not notice missing until you're ready to cook dinner. But once it's gone, replacing it can be surprisingly difficult. Number 7. Cooking oil. At number 7 is one of the most important ingredients in almost every kitchen. Cooking oil. Whether you're frying eggs, sautéing vegetables, making homemade dressings, or preparing a family dinner, cooking oil is used constantly. Common options include vegetable oil, canola oil, sunflower oil, and olive oil. But the supply of these products depends on agricultural crops, processing facilities, transportation, and global trade. Weather problems can reduce crop yields. Higher fuel prices can increase transportation expenses. And changes in international trade can affect the cost of imported oils. That means a disruption in one part of the world can eventually influence prices at your local grocery store. Cooking oil is also used by restaurants and food manufacturers, so household shoppers aren't the only source of demand. When prices rise, families can sometimes save money by comparing different types and sizes. A larger container may offer a better price per ounce, but only if you can use it before quality declines. It's also smart to keep more than one cooking method available. Depending on the recipe, butter, shortening, or other cooking fats may provide alternatives. If you use oil regularly, replacing the bottle before it is completely empty can help you avoid an emergency grocery trip. Just remember to store it according to the label instructions and protect it from excessive heat and light. Cooking oil earns the number 7 spot because it's an everyday kitchen essential with a supply chain that depends heavily on crops, processing, and transportation. And now we're entering the top 6. The next grocery item is something that seems simple, but it plays a much bigger role in the food system than most shoppers realize. Number 6. Flour. At number 6 is one of the most important ingredients in the grocery store. Flour. It's the foundation of bread, pizza dough, pancakes, biscuits, cakes, cookies, and countless other foods. For families who bake at home, flour is an essential pantry staple. But its availability depends heavily on wheat production. Wheat crops are affected by drought, extreme heat, heavy rainfall, and other weather conditions. When harvests are smaller, the cost of wheat can increase. That pressure can eventually reach the price of flour and the many products made from it. Flour also depends on processing and transportation. Wheat must be harvested, transported to mills, processed, packaged, and distributed before it reaches grocery stores. Each stage adds another potential point of disruption. Smart shoppers don't need to panic by large quantities. Instead, they can keep a reasonable supply based on how much their family actually uses. If you bake frequently, storing flour in airtight containers can help protect it from moisture and pantry pests. For longer storage, some households choose to freeze flour, depending on the type and their available space. It's also useful to have alternatives. Cornmeal, oats, or other grains can sometimes replace wheat-based ingredients in specific recipes. Flour earns the number 6 spot because it's a basic ingredient behind countless everyday foods, and disruptions in wheat production can affect both flour and many products made from it. But now we're entering the top 5. The next grocery item is something millions of people consume every day, and changes in its supply can affect everything from breakfast routines to restaurant menus. Number 5. Coffee. We're now in the top 5. At number 5 is one of the most popular beverages in the world. Coffee. For millions of people, coffee isn't just a grocery item. It's part of their daily routine. Many households start the morning with a fresh cup, and restaurants, offices, and cafes depend on coffee every day. But coffee is different from many other products on this list because much of the supply comes from international growing regions. That means weather conditions, transportation problems, shipping delays, and global market changes can all influence prices and availability. Coffee plants are sensitive to changes in temperature and rainfall. Poor growing conditions can reduce harvests. When supply becomes tighter, prices can rise. Transportation is another factor. Coffee beans must travel long distances from farms to processing facilities, exporters, importers, roasters, and eventually retailers. Any disruption along that journey can affect what shoppers see on store shelves. Smart families who drink coffee regularly can protect their budget by watching for sales and comparing brands. Buying whole beans or ground coffee in larger packages may offer better value depending on the price. Instant coffee can also provide a shelf-stable alternative for households that want a backup option. The key is not to panic. If your family uses coffee every day, simply keeping a reasonable backup supply can prevent you from being forced to buy whatever is available during a temporary shortage. Store coffee properly according to the packaging instructions to maintain quality. Coffee earns the number 5 spot because it's a daily staple for millions of people, relies heavily on international supply chains, and can be affected by weather and global transportation conditions. But now we're down to the final 4. The next grocery item is something that helps turn simple ingredients into complete meals. And smart families know that running out of it can make everyday cooking much more difficult. Number 4. Pasta. At number 4 is one of the most affordable and versatile foods in the grocery store. Pasta. Spaghetti. Macaroni. Penne. Rotini. There are countless varieties, but they all share one important advantage. Pasta is an easy way to create filling meals from inexpensive ingredients. It can be combined with canned tomatoes, beans, vegetables, cheese, chicken, or small amounts of meat. That makes it an important staple for families trying to control their grocery spending. Pasta also has a long storage life when kept in a cool, dry place. That allows shoppers to buy it during regular grocery trips and gradually build a pantry supply without worrying about immediate spoilage. But pasta prices can still be influenced by the wheat supply chain. Wheat production depends on weather and harvest conditions. Processing requires energy, and transportation costs affect the final price. If any of these factors become more expensive, shoppers may eventually notice higher prices. Smart families don't need to buy huge quantities. Instead, they can keep a reasonable supply based on how quickly their household uses it. Buying store brands can also reduce costs, while watching for sales can help stretch the grocery budget. Pasta earns the number 4 spot because it is inexpensive, versatile, easy to store, and useful for creating dozens of meals. It's also one of those products that can disappear quickly when shoppers begin preparing for uncertainty because it's affordable and requires very little storage space. Now we're down to the final 3. The next grocery item is something that can turn a basic pantry into a much more complete food supply, and it plays a critical role in meals across the country. Number 3. Rice. We're down to the final 3. At number 3 is one of the most important staple foods in the world. Rice. For millions of families, rice is a weekly grocery essential. It's affordable, filling, easy to prepare, and incredibly versatile. You can serve it with vegetables, beans, chicken, fish, or almost any type of meat. It can also become fried rice, rice bowls, soups, and countless other meals. That flexibility is one reason rice is so popular during times of uncertainty. But rice availability depends on a global supply chain. Weather conditions can affect harvests. Flooding and drought can damage crops. Transportation problems can delay shipments. And changes in international trade can influence prices. When shoppers become concerned about shortages, rice can also experience sudden increases in demand. That can lead to temporary gaps on store shelves, especially for popular package sizes. Smart families don't need to panic buy. Instead, they can maintain a reasonable supply based on their normal consumption. White rice is especially practical for longer-term pantry storage when kept in suitable conditions. Families can rotate older supplies into everyday meals and replace them during normal grocery trips. That approach builds preparedness gradually without unnecessary waste. Rice earns the number 3 spot because it is affordable, versatile, and essential to countless meals. It's also one of the foods that shoppers often rush to buy when they become concerned about food availability. And now we're down to the final 2. The next grocery item is something that many families use every single day, and a disruption in its supply can affect far more than just one breakfast table. Number 2. Milk. We're down to the final 2. At number 2 is one of the most important everyday grocery staples. Milk. Millions of families use milk for breakfast, coffee, cereal, baking, cooking, and countless recipes. It's also a key ingredient in many other dairy products, which means changes in the milk supply can have effects far beyond the refrigerator section. Milk production depends on dairy farms, animal feed, labor, energy, refrigeration, and transportation. If the cost of feed increases, farmers face higher production expenses. If transportation or energy costs rise, those pressures can move through the supply chain. And because fresh milk is highly perishable, it requires a reliable cold chain from the farm all the way to the grocery store. That's why disruptions can sometimes lead to temporary shortages or changes in availability. Smart families don't need to buy excessive amounts of fresh milk. Instead, they can keep alternatives available. Shelf-stable milk can be useful for emergency pantry storage. Powdered milk can also work in baking and cooking when fresh milk isn't available. Plant-based milk products may provide another option, depending on household preferences and dietary needs. Having alternatives means you aren't completely dependent on one product. If you regularly use fresh milk, Simply watching prices and maintaining a backup option can make grocery disruptions easier to manage. Milk earns the number 2 spot because it's a daily staple, highly perishable, and connected to a complex dairy supply chain. But now we've reached number 1. The final grocery item is something that almost every household depends on. And when it becomes difficult to find, shoppers immediately notice. Number 1. Bread. We've reached number 1. The grocery item that smart families should keep an eye on before summer ends is bread. It may be one of the simplest foods in the grocery store, but it's also one of the most widely purchased. Bread is used for breakfast, sandwiches, toast, burgers, lunches, and countless quick meals. But producing bread requires more than just flour. The supply chain depends on wheat, yeast, cooking oils, sugar, packaging, energy, labor, and transportation. If the cost or availability of any major ingredient changes, bakeries and manufacturers can face higher production costs. Wheat prices are especially important. Poor harvests caused by drought, extreme weather, or other agricultural problems can affect flour prices. Then there are transportation costs and packaging expenses. All of these factors eventually influence what shoppers see on grocery shelves. Bread also has a relatively short shelf life compared with many pantry staples. That means grocery stores must constantly receive fresh deliveries. Any disruption in production or transportation can quickly become noticeable. Smart families can prepare without panic. If your household goes through bread quickly, consider keeping an extra loaf in the freezer. Freezing bread can help extend its useful life and reduce waste. You can also keep alternatives available. Tortillas, crackers, rice, pasta, or other pantry staples can help create meals when fresh bread isn't available. The key is flexibility. Don't depend on one specific brand or type. If your favorite loaf suddenly disappears, having another option means you can continue making meals without paying whatever price happens to be available. Bread earns the number 1 spot because it is an everyday staple that depends on a surprisingly complex supply chain. From wheat fields to flour mills, from bakeries to distribution centers, and finally to your local grocery store. There are many steps involved before that loaf reaches your kitchen. The biggest lesson isn't that you should panic because a grocery item might become harder to find. It's that smart shoppers pay attention. Supply chains change. Prices move. Products are recalled. Seasonal availability shifts. And grocery stores constantly adjust their inventory. The best strategy is simple. Buy what your family actually uses. Watch for reasonable sales. Keep practical alternatives available. And maintain a modest backup supply of important staples when your budget and storage space allow. Preparedness isn't about filling your shopping cart in a panic. It's about making small, smart decisions before you actually need them. If you enjoyed this video, subscribe to Prepper Pulse and turn on notifications. We upload new videos daily with practical grocery tips, food storage ideas, and preparedness strategies to help you stay informed and ready. Stay prepared, stay informed, and we'll see you in the next video.